So I decided to change some of my habits. And one of them is when I get home, I'll like in the evening. My brain is fried. It's like I can't possibly do side projects or anything. And I just want to like unwind, and so I would watch TV or something and like always have a beer. And so I still want to drink, and I still like drinking. But now like the new rule is that I'm toying with is that I don't drink at home. So like I can still drink, just I have to be. Basically.
Wait, hold on. Wait, so you're just becoming a public alcoholic? That's your new strategy? Just leave the house
Well, no,
as much as possible?
this is like a celebratory occasion. Also, I have a child, so that means I'm not leaving the house very frequently.
That's what they say now.
Yeah, you'll see me.
You start bringing the child and the beer?
You'll just see me in a park with a couple paper bags.
Pizza's here.
Yay! So I got some good news and bad news. The good news is my garage is done.
Oh, good.
Bad news is I'm gonna need my desk back. So
Yeah.
when can I do that? Now? Yeah, I can do that. Hi.
Yeah, I got plates now.
How does that look?
So it looks like this guy here is not being just like. Shouldn't? I mean, it's not like swimming. You're not gonna get cramps.
It's a half an hour before we're going stage.
Hello and welcome everyone.
You say that now, am I still? But, okay, I'll follow.
Okay. You're just gonna get me.
Alright.
But do you wanna get mine?
Yeah, I'll take yours. What?
Oh.
Yeah, it's ATXT. And then if you follow it, like, I'm gonna give you suggestions for all the catalog.
We met last time. And I tried to reach out through email, but I noticed that it bounced, so I got about 1%. Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Pick a card, any card.
I think I just mistyped it.
No.
Yeah, and then another one is,
Yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. But yeah, we chatted afterwards.
and then the third one is.
It's only a 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Kids rather than sitting here with children work and all that stuff.
And if you follow those, it's gonna give you like suggestions. And suggestions for
Yeah.
anything like these ones and like.
Right, yeah, I can't believe it's not.
It's not like you didn't like that.
But I could just look at it without following you. Right, are you going to? You want to increase your followers?
I'll follow you back.
What's new on the project?
Sweet. I don't know.
Yes.
Barely. Barely.
Still splitting time between course, skills engineer, and Rails, React, and Rails. I like Ember.
So we have pizza. Come get pizza.
I don't know if I'm just like a noob with React, but yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Compared to Ember or in general?
Compared to Ember. But like, it depends on what you're doing, right? If it's just a little tiny, small little nicety somewhere embedded in your page, React's fine.
So you need a
Page,
send out.
it's super complicated, it's for Ember.
I haven't done it. I've done it.
So I think attendance is a bit low.
Did Ember back?
I'm kind of stuck here. Like, not even. What kind did you get? I never had fruit on my pizza as a kid. I never had fruit on my pizza Really?
The mustache stuff.
Where do you want to go for your birthday, Grandma?
It's either that or Shake Shack.
Oh, that's pretty legit. I haven't been to this Shake Shack.
It's so frustrating. You want to grab like these little frameworks, you think like it's going to give you this big productivity boost, and then like you get into doing it, and then you get something that's slightly outside the box, and it just destroys all the productivity. That's how I felt about React. It's like as long as you're doing like really simple, straightforward stuff, it's a pretty you get a pretty good productivity win out of it. But then you start like aging up in complexity. And, like,
They go with
I feel like you're reinventing a framework.
I feel like operations people in the medical industry have like meeting
Data for the server. I'm just rendering a particle from her, you know, her gas or cluster. Right, so like, yeah, show that.
Even they only know the operation like 3 days a week.
Updating a particle by particle.
Pretty empty.
That's what we're doing. What you're gonna do is when I
That's a little Twitter.
But you said you didn't use it.
Little like almost on the other side. Not quite.
Do you have an account? You wanna follow me?
Actually, I was behind what I had before. So.
Very recommended.
I agree with what you were saying about Nick
what do you do?
and the iPhone. I also see like what shopping is you see.
The most recent one.
Okay. Have you seen any previous ones?
I have, but this was the first time I really noticed.
This is the first time it's actually ever used.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I think he memorized this.
Yeah. His building block, he's definitely my favorite.
Which is pretty intense.
So you know,
I really want to make like
I took a whole box home. I mean, not home, but to my office to share with my coworkers. And I couldn't fit it in last month. And I couldn't fit it into the office. The box was too big.
Wow, what did you do?
So I put some of it in aluminum foil. And I kept it in the rest of it. I went downstairs and I asked the security people on the cleaning staff if they wanted it.
So they want it?
Yeah.
Well, because you know, like this after they get so much.
We're probably gonna get started about 5 after.
Even the security.
An hour, maybe. Give you a little bit extra time. Roll the paper towel, break it.
They usually do. At least they were on time this time. And I mean, you take your bets. That makes me feel better. Less. Think you can do a little bit less because of like square.
On time, I was just 7 times.
Not the time I specified. I learned to do it 30 minutes early, and then we'll write on time.
Did you talk to them about it?
You're gonna talk tonight?
I talk to them every time, sternly too. I'm like, I'm a very nice guy, very chill, takes a lot to make me.
Oh, no, I read, yeah.
Stern with these people, they get them.
Chris?
I tell them every time, listen, it makes me look bad when I'm not here on time. I said,
Self-delivering once and then always.
oh, you're right. You're
Yeah,
absolutely
it's
right.
like-
They're every time. Exactly.
Have you been to
Yeah.
Why don't you just cook those out? Order from just like twice this time.
All right.
But we like this pizza.
The pizza is really good.
Yeah.
It's really good too.
Yeah.
This stuff is really good.
You said 5?
I like you said.
My favorite one is the cock. The cock is amazing. It's like the style of pizza that you say I can talk here before. I mean the name.
You wanna get set up?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Make sure that everything's working.
want to stand in the
I could, or I've got this one.
Oh.
You could stay standing there. You want me to?
I mean,
I can talk like this.
whatever's better.
Okay, so welcome everyone to Os on Rails. My name is Richard Schneeman, or Schneems. I will be your guide this evening. Let me see. So there's an official script here, and I'm supposed to tell you how long I've been attending. I've been attending Os on Rails since 2008, so can't do that math. I currently am a developer for Heroku, and I've been using Rails since 0.9. So yeah, enough about me. Does anybody have any community announcements? Any announcements from the community? You are the community, by the way. What's that, Caleb? There's a conference in Austin.
Aren't you involved in that?
I don't know. I'm not in the community today.
There is a conference in Austin, and it's a Ruby conference, and it's kind of weird, as the city suggests. Keep Ruby Weird will be back for its 4th year. We're aiming for October 27th, and the CSP is already open, so if you have talks, we'd love to see local speakers, and we'll work on getting tickets and everything else announced soon. Don't check the website, it's not updated.
But the website is so weird. All right. We events, conferences, housekeeping. So bathrooms are around that corner and to either side. The agenda is we're going to hear a lovely talk by Hannah, and then we're going to have a break, and then we're going to get a talk by Caleb. A lovely talk by both of our speakers combined. Each of them will give half of a lovely talk. Combined total will be a single lovely experience. And thank you very much for Capital Factory for hosting. Okay, all right. So first up, we have Hannah Oppenheimer from Move Health, and she's going to be talking about the code of a climb. So if you want to come on up here, we can get started.
Can you guys hear me with this mic? It's good. Cool. Yeah. So I'm Hannah Oppenheimer. I'm a developer and designer at Move Health. We are a surgery center that does hip and knee replacements and offers a pretty unique and holistic patient experience through a bundled payment model. Today I'm going to talk about two very different groups of people, coders and rock climbers, that have one big thing in common, and that's problem solving. So to get into it, let's talk about the basics of climbing so that it doesn't seem so foreign. There are a ton of different types of climbing, but I'll go through the most common. In trad climbing, or traditional climbing, you place temporary equipment in the cracks as you climb your way up the rocks. These temporary stays in the wall are attached to your rope, which is attached to your harness, which is attached to you. And when you're done with the route, you and your friends will remove the gear that you've placed temporarily on that wall on your way out. Here you see this woman placing equipment along her way. Sport climbing is similar, but permanent bolts have already been placed. So you just need to clip your rope into the bolts as you move up the route. And here you can see this woman climbing towards bolts that have already been placed. Top roping is the most popular climbing that you'll see at school gyms or public rock walls. The rope has already been placed at the top of the route. All you have to do is connect your harness to the rope and climb on up. And here you can see two gentlemen climbing up with the top rope. Free solo climbing is the most psychotic form of climbing because it involves absolutely no safety equipment. Famous free solo climbers include Alex Honnold, who did El Capitan in Yosemite, and Steph Davis, who, among other things, did the Diamond in Long's Peak. And finally, Bear, who has been free solo climbing since before it was cool. Mountaineering is the most complex type of climbing because it may involve all the previous types of climbing, plus ice climbing with special equipment like hand picks or crampon shoes. Here's a shot of me with my mountaineering partner, John. Bouldering is rock climbing on a wall that's short enough that you don't need any equipment. In bouldering, climbers will fall safely onto thick pads or just land on their feet. Bouldering is also really easy to recreate at indoor gyms. The staff will set up routes that are typically color-coded, not only to identify one route versus another, but also to indicate difficulty level. For example, on my illustration over here, the orange route might be easier because it has larger holds that are closer together, while the blue route might be harder because it sits horizontally under the overhang and then comes out with some small or medium holds. Bouldering is also the most type of climbing that I do because it involves minimal risk and minimal equipment. So now that we've gotten the basics down, let's talk about jargon. Climbing has more jargon than any sport I've ever participated in. Chimney, barn door, crux, jug, mantle, pitch, clean, stemming. These are all words that I didn't know 5 months ago, or I had a different definition for them, and I use them regularly now. Jargon can be fun. When you're able to speak the local language, it's a sign of belonging, an inside joke. As developers, we have our own ridiculous jargon that we quickly learn to take for granted. I'll give you an example from the climbing world. Since I'm such a Gumby, can you show me the beta for the chimney before you got to the jug just below the mantle? I want to avoid barn dooring like I have on the pincher every time I tried to send it. So that's what you sound like when you talk nerdy in whatever industry you're in. To people who aren't climbers or to people who aren't coders, when you use jargon, especially of a bunch of it in one sentence, you sound a little like Willy Wonka with an Australian dialect run through a terrible Google Translate. I have an example from the coding world as well. My friend was a JavaScript professor at Rutgers University for a semester or two. And one night, because of a scheduling conflict, his wife actually had to go with him to class. And she had no engineering experience other than hearing him say things like React and Python and Ruby and Bourbon, Sass, Java, and so on. So when my friend gave the class an example to work with, he said something like, okay, let's pretend we're making a website for chocolate. Well, later that night, after the class, his wife asked him, what language is chocolate written in? She thought chocolate was just another JavaScript framework. When you're a beginner, hearing jargon you don't know can be overwhelming. An ever-growing list of stuff you don't know yet. This can perpetuate imposter syndrome. Jargon signifies boundaries between insiders and outsiders, but it can also create layers of boundaries within an industry. So keep that in mind when you're trying to build and maintain welcoming communities. Once you get past the jargon of both activities, it's clear that both rock climbing and coding involve problem solving. Rock climbers refer to their climbs as problems, especially when they work them over and over again until they master that route in the way that they seem fit. That can mean that they just go to the top of the project, or it can mean that they conquer one part of that project that's really difficult. Climbers, like coders, discuss the design, components, performance efficiencies, and risks involved with their problems. There are tons of problem-solving techniques, but I'll talk about a few of the main ones here. First, in any problem, such as a standardized test, your teacher is going to try to get you to read the question the way people intended on writing it. So, for example, in the science portion of the SAT, you don't actually need to know molecular biology or chemistry to get the answers right. You just need to know how to read the tables, and then from the tables, answer the questions. So I'm going to sound silly to experienced climbers, but when I first started rock climbing, I actually didn't realize that the holds at the bouldering gym were color-coded for a reason. I just thought they were really fun and vibrant. I also didn't realize that there were stickers on the holds that indicate where you're supposed to start a climb and end a climb. These rules made climbing slightly more difficult, because I couldn't just wander aimlessly around the gym, but at least it had purpose. It wasn't an overwhelming blob of colors anymore. Then I learned another obvious thing in retrospect, that the holds aren't all the same shape. They're different sizes and textures, so I began reading the routes. And I remember feeling similarly when I first started learning to code. I saw a terminal or a text editor, and it was like one of those horrible 90s movies where someone's hacking into the mainframe and there's a woman screaming and a timer is ticking away. Anyway, I saw a bunch of numbers and letters that didn't mean anything to me. And it wasn't until I started learning how functions are written, what classes look like, how you can pass parameters into things, that I started to, in a way, read the route for programming. This might not sound like a problem-solving strategy, but it's just that it's so basic that the moment that you're not a beginner anymore, reading the route doesn't sound complicated. There are definitely a lot of climbers and coders that like to approach a problem simply by hacking away at it first. In rock climbing, this just means approaching a wall or a route and just going for it with no beta or information about that route. Some rock climbers like this challenge because it gives them a literal hands-on feel for the challenges ahead. And some people like it because they find that getting the beta ahead of time is sort of a way of cheating. I personally don't love doing that because I like to know how I should prepare for the challenge ahead of me and not waste time and energy on things that I could have known before. For coders, using trial and error can also help with process of elimination. Sometimes coders use trial and error to solve a problem because they have a few ideas of how it could be solved, and it might not take them that long to try out those couple ideas. Trial and error can also be a really good learning experience as coders level up their skills. But many people also like to plan out their solutions and even practice them. For example, when you go to the gym, you might see somebody who looks like they're miming with their hands, and it's really funny to see at first because you think, oh, that's nice, they let crazy people in. But they're actually looking at a specific route and waving their hands in the air in the approximate way that they would once they were on the wall. This gives them a better idea of what's possible or not. For example, if they practice with their hands, they might realize that they can't actually stretch their arms out that long, or something like that. It can also help with visualization. Michael Jordan is said to have actually pictured in his mind the lob and the swoosh of a basketball before he actually took the free throw. Some believe that the visualization of success actually helps your body follow through with that. In miming out the climbing route, climbers can also visualize the success of using tension or pressure in various ways to get through the problem. Another example of planning and route climbing is called pseudo-leading. Lead climbing is when you're the first person to ascend a route in your group and you bring the rope with you, attaching it to bolts along the way. To learn lead climbing, some people actually use top roping. So they'll attach their harness to the top rope and then bring that lead climb up with them. This is so that they don't have to risk a fall when they could first practice on the top rope before actually going out into the wilderness where there will be no top rope to help them. Pseudocoding isn't a direct metaphor for pseudo-leading, but pseudocoding is also another way of planning and practicing. Pseudocoding is when you type out your code in plain English before spending the time to write real code. This is great for planning your route to the solution with minimal effort and risk of failure. Not writing out tests or classes first, because if you had planned out your route through to the end in pseudocode, you might have found a better way more quickly. In rock climbing, they would never use the term pairing, but it's actually something that I do a lot with folks. I enjoy pairing with people more experienced than me or who have solved the particular problem that I'm working on. They watch me and give me advice if I ask for it. It's a good practice in both of our industries to make sure people want advice before you give it. Beta in climbing means information about the climb. So if you say, show me the beta, that means you're asking for someone to show you how to do the climb or how they did the climb. But some people like trying to solve the problem on their own before getting hints. In coding, it works the same way. Pairing has its own set of lingo, driving or ping-ponging, but essentially you let one person drive for a little bit or type for a little bit, and then you take over. And sometimes you try to solve it on your own in a creative way, and sometimes you ask for guidance. In both worlds, I also love pairing with people who have less experience than me, because it's a great way to test my knowledge, whether that means explaining how to set up a factory for testing or how to hold a pincher on the wall. Pairing with someone with less experience can be a rewarding and also a positive challenge in communication practice. Problem solving doesn't mean finding and fixing a bug. Features are also unsolved problems. There are a couple of ways we break things into components in coding. First, think about our testing practices. In TDD, we use tests to drive out our development. Feature tests check that the whole thing works as expected, while unit tests checks that each individual piece works as expected. Then we build each component individually to pass the tests. Only when the feature specs pass do we find out if those components truly work together properly. Another example of components in coding is an obvious one, SOA, or service-oriented architecture, where multiple components communicate with each other to create a beautiful web of a product, hopefully. In climbing, we break up our problems too. For example, last night at the gym, I watched a woman working on a problem. She skipped to the middle of her problem by using any holds in any color, and then she just tried that middle part of her problem over and over again until she could do it successfully. If she had actually done that from the beginning every time, she would have gotten exhausted doing a part that she already knew how to solve. So after solving one component at a time, she would string it together in a full feature send of that route. Problem solving can be really tough on days where it just isn't working for you. You spend hours trying to solve a bug or figure out why your tests aren't passing, and it's just not happening. But at some point, you have a breakthrough. You step back for a little bit, you come back to your computer or back to the wall, and it just clicks. Or you read a tutorial or stretch for a little bit. Learning to rock climb and code can be really powerful, empowering feelings. In rock climbing, I will work on a project for days or even weeks. I'll work on a couple of them in a given climbing session, but there's usually one or two that I'm really thinking about and working hard on. I'll sit by it, watch other people's ways of solving it, and keep working on it until I've solved it, or until they rotate that problem off the wall. I'm not great yet. I first fell in love with coding because it felt so awesome to know that on Monday you had no idea of how to solve problem X, but by Friday those bugs were squashed and you had preventative tests in place to catch it next time. In both climbing and coding, it takes quite a long time, years, decades, and for some of us never, to get to a point where you feel like there are no hard problems left to solve in your line of sport or work. Some people were lucky enough to learn how to climb in the actual rocks outside, but for those of us who learned from a gym in Brooklyn, making that transition to the outdoors can be really empowering. Outdoor climbing presents entirely new challenges that can't be mimicked indoors. From the texture of real rocks with hornets' nests hidden in the cracks, true story, to predicting incoming weather patterns. Indoors, you typically have defined and color-coded routes, but outdoors, you won't know the route ahead of time. So you'll have to make your decisions mid-climb when your arms are really tired. Similarly, in production apps, you can get challenges that you can't always simulate before going live. From high traffic to your site to bugs that slip through your testing framework, if you simply build portfolio work but never truly have users, did the tree even fall in the forest? How you climb or code can be as important as getting to the finish line, depending on what your goals are. A lot of great climbers look graceful when they climb. They flag their toes like ballerinas, they keep their arms extended instead of short like T-Rex, they move their hips in the direction of where their next reach is going to go. But looking graceful isn't actually the goal, it's the means to an end. These movements, which take a lot of practice, actually save strength and energy, allowing the climber to go farther and faster, or last longer. Similarly, in development, there are design principles that people often follow to enhance the extensibility of the code, make it more human readable or reusable. This isn't just to make it look pretty, although some people take it to extremes. This is to make your code base go farther and last longer. In both of these scenarios I've mentioned, climbers and developers can employ best practices if longevity is the goal. But in both cases, there are exceptions. Maybe you're just trying to build a V1 prototype. Maybe you're on a tight deadline. Maybe it's a rock climbing route that's really difficult and you just want to get it done as quickly as possible and come back on another day and rework it better. One thing about style that I've learned is that it matters very little how fast you climb or code. I know climbers that are quick and forceful, who are successful on the same routes as climbers who are slow and graceful. In coding, as long as you've got a great handle on your text editor, the bajillion Vim plugins you're using aren't going to make you better. They're just going to make you faster. If that's important to you, just be sure you don't spend your whole day working on your Vim RC. Life's short. Let someone else on your team be that person. So let's talk about an issue that plagues both the rock climbing and the engineering communities: diversity. Only 35% of competitors in the 2006 American Boulder Series Open National Championships were women, but in 2014 that number grew to 43%. Rock climbing in general is a very rapidly growing sport, and a lot of that is women. It's being considered for the 2020 Olympics. While I've been rock climbing since I was a kid, I didn't actually really get into it until January of this year when I joined a group called Lockout Ladies at Austin Bouldering Project that meets once a week on Thursdays. It's a really welcoming and friendly group for all levels. Once in a while, this group has guest speakers. One of them was Tsukasa Mizuguchi, who was a guest setter at ABP. A setter is someone who places the holds on the walls. They use a color, I already explained the color-coded system a couple times. Tsukasa explained to us through a translator that in her hometown in Japan, she's the only woman setter, and in Japan, the entire country, she's one of only a handful of women among hundreds of men who are setters. So there's a famous comedy book called Stuff White People Like, and I would be surprised if rock climbing was not the first page. According to the National Park Service, only 7% of national park visitors are African American. Only 1.5% of USA Climbing members identified as African American, and only 4.7% as mixed race. Brothers of Climbing is one organization that's trying to get more black men into the sport and feel welcomed in it. You can read more about them on the Brooklyn Boulders blog. USA Climbing hosts annual competitions, and next month they will be hosting an adaptive competition under a variety of categories, including neurological and physical disabilities, visual impairment, upper and lower extremity amputations, and more. Winners will compete in the World Paraclimbing Championships. I'm certainly interested in learning more about how we can build accessibility into our apps from the get-go. And in New York, there was actually a meetup just for accessibility development, which is really interesting. In our own industry, we have a few organizations that work locally in Austin to get and retain more women and people of color in tech. Just as you shouldn't be afraid to try climbing, you also shouldn't be afraid to try new volunteer opportunities. Latinitas aims to get more Latina girls into tech at a younger age, and I got to volunteer at one of their UX workshops, and it was a lot of fun, and it was super easy to volunteer. They give you everything and just, you read it out loud. Other organizations, Women Who Code, Girl Development, and Chick Tech TX, while these organizations aim to increase diversity in tech, none of these organizations are going to help retain them once it's there. We all need to make sure that microaggressions of misogyny and white supremacy in our workplaces and in our outdoor adventure communities are handled properly and immediately and prevented in the first place by being decent, welcoming human beings. So speaking of welcoming, I welcome you all to join me in bouldering next Tuesday. My meetup group called Texas Outdoors is a group of techie people in Texas who like to do outdoorsy stuff. So find us on meetup.com, and if you're nervous about it, don't worry, anyone can climb. That's a goat. And special thanks to Lynn, who did most but not all of my illustrations. She's local from Austin and does awesome stuff. So, thank you.
Who did that one?
Me, I did that one.
Cool. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? Were you prepared for questions?
I don't know how to be prepared for questions, but I'm here to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions?
The setters are mechanical. Now I have a feeling that was a picture of one where you're going through all the handles, the Twitter handles. You set it in a crack, and you press the button, and I guess it springs open and will lock itself.
Oh yeah, the equipment you're talking about?
Yeah.
So I've never actually, no, that equipment is actually for climbing, wow, I just presented on
Trad
it.
climbing?
Thank you, trad climbing. They use a number of pieces of equipment to like bolt themselves into the wall temporarily, and then.
I'm so afraid you'd be 200 feet up and that thing would just slide out of the crevice, and there you go.
Well, a lot of people do it, and they don't have any issue. And if you only are dependent on one, then you're probably close to the ground. Whereas if you're higher up, you've placed a lot of them. So if one goes out, you're gonna what's called zipper, which is like one of them's gonna come out and you're gonna go down and hope the next one catches you. But yeah, usually it works out well.
Cool.
The free solo climbing though, you're on your own.
Yeah, right.
I don't know why anyone does it.
I've seen the
I
videos.
hope they don't have parents. Like, I can't imagine.
They have good life insurance policies?
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Do you, like, off the top of your mind, like, what are some of the things, some of the jargons that you had to struggle with at first when you're learning a language or a framework that is not like the basic programming, stuff?
Well, I think for me it was more like networking was hard because you'd be at an event like this and people would be like, oh yeah, like Elixir's the best, and you'd be like, Elixir. And so like I think maybe my example wasn't great, but ping ponging. So there's jargon outside of proper names of languages, but like ping ponging, I think my old boss used to use that all the time, and we had a new person on our team, and I was just like, at some point I was like, do you know what ping ponging is? And they were like, no. And I was like, okay, it's like integral to our work here, so he's gonna expect you to ping pong. If you don't know what ping ponging is, like, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I noticed that,
Ping ponging is, you write a test, and then your pair partner solves the test in code, and then you switch places, basically.
Notice like a lot of the terms that are used, obviously a lot of them are English based. For people who English is the second or third or fourth language. Scaffolding, for example, in Rails takes a lot of time for people to realize, oh wait, scaffolding is the actual English word, not just the Rails word.
Yeah, that's a good example.
They didn't just make it up.
Yeah, they didn't
Yeah.
just make it up. Like, scaffolding on a building, that's something that actually exists, right?
Yeah.
Because for most people, that term would never enter into their vocab, even if they know English.
Yeah, totally. So, anyone else? Questions?
Cool, so thank you all, thank you very much. If we can give another round of applause. Okay, so we're gonna have first we're gonna do a survey, and we're gonna ask for people who are hiring and people who are looking to be hired. Is anybody here currently hiring? Show of hands. You take a look around the room, keep your hands up. We got 3, all right. Is anybody looking for a job? But you're both hiring and looking for a job?
I was gonna say that my fiance is Lindsay Gorski, who did the illustrations.
Oh, no way.
And she's a freelance graphic designer and illustrator, so if you guys have any of those projects, that would be great for her. I'd be happy to put you guys in touch.
Clearly, she's awesome.
That's
She's
amazing.
great. Yeah, she really is great.
Did you know about this ahead of time?
Yeah.
Okay.
She is fantastic.
Okay.
I didn't know he was gonna be here.
Okay. So sorry, can everybody who's looking, if you can hold your hands up?
Looking or hiring?
Looking, we already did. So if you are in either of those camps, if you can kind of come up during the break and mingle and say like what you do, what you're looking for, that kind of a thing. We are going to take about, 10 minutes, so we're going to be back at 45 after, and then we are going to hear half of a lovely talk by Caleb Thompson. Well, there was
And half of it here.
I heard you think? Oh.
By saying that she was going to give a little and then with Caleb, I just said he was going to give a talk. And he was like, oh wait. And then I had to split the difference.
Can I grade, like, outraise it's going well? However.
That was a cue for everyone to get up and mingle.
Yeah, mingle, bathroom, you have a couple minutes. Hire, get hired. Yeah. I have like 4 beers if anybody wants a beer.
And also, it's like talking about doing that backward and like doing rails a little bit.
How many people do you need to sort? Okay.
So did you start careers and stuff?
Basically a third of the audience. Oh shit, I should have bought shirts. I've got an entire box of them. They sent me one for who not been yet.
80% of my time is rails.
This is,
Yeah, actually I started.
What are these pants for? What did you buy them for?
Well, they were at like 1 or 2 of the job fairs. I previously met them, but had been hired for some other places. But
Do you have
I was talking to
Oh, how long have you been here?
I don't know if you saw, there was a sinkhole that formed right in front of the car of my office. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, there was a sinkhole that formed right in front of the,
Like you're following
borough of San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are.
Whatever.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, pretty much. That's the gist of it. Sorry, have you done this before? Okay. You're like, psh, I got this. What did you present last? Oh, this is fancy. Is this all one slide? Okay, good.
Check this out.
Just the movements or slides? What? What? Vertical bars?
Better.
Holy shit, that's cool. How did you find out about that?
It's, I read about it a long time ago. It's a font that turns numbers. It's like a ligature.
Yeah, that's
So it
amazing.
can also just turn it off.
You can also what?
Just turn like the ligatures off.
Ah. That was tape.
I built a master slide, but it took me a long time to figure out how to do that.
Okay.
I also wrote code that printed out every step of the algorithm, but it didn't, and did the colors.
Yeah? Nice.
I,
Wait, you code that did the colors?
yeah, so it prints out just like the text, the numbers.
Oh, is that part of the font?
Well, no.
Okay.
This is like colored text.
Yes. Got it.
So it printed out, in whatever
Regular font.
regular font.
Okay.
But it has these numbers in there. And because you can copy from the terminal with the color, and paste into here with that color.
Oh, smart.
So do that.
So you just did that for each slide? Wow. Oh, you've done Apple scripts.
I did. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I've never successfully written. Every time I try, it just is very.
Keep Boston hacking.
Can't remember.
I think it's Keep Boston hacking. I also think my computer remembers it.
Is it gonna die?
Remembers it.
Ah, okay. Do you need your poster board?
Can you guys hear
But it's not easy because of our No, but I got one. I have the tricard writer.
Who has the password?
Front desk, Zach, I think. Tell him you're one of the speakers.
Can you collect cards on this?
I just got the new one. I just got the new Capital One. I mean, I just got a replacement for it. Yeah, we're hiring because the old one has two batteries. This one, I mean, it doesn't have any digital.
What happened?
It actually has the taxes.
Would you like to give a talk?
Maybe, but not giving a talk about it. This week
Okay, what are you talking about for Ember?
Kind of how to manage state in the labor application.
Okay.
There's like, pretty strong conventions in the labor community about how to do that, and I'm make an argument about what's not great, maybe I'll heck out of the room, we'll see.
What do you think you would talk about for? You could talk about.
How do you know which card?
Why Ember is right.
How do you know which card to use?
Oh, it's kind of like, it's actually pretty complicated. Well, one of them it has like the nice have like React. Two of them have
Using React on that.
they have like different amounts for like different
Some of the things I'm using it, it's great.
So one of them is a few points for shipping. And apparently the category he has codes that have
Just like React.
so it's the same category for like hosting providers. Currently it's like the category and then like business services not as for classified or
And I'm trying, like, I don't know if it's because I'm sensitive now, and maybe I'm just kind of know what I'm doing. But, yeah, like, I can't get on that. I can't get on that. I feel like it's great if you do something more time. If you want to do something, you actually back on the attack. You have to, you're actually and now you're inventing your framework. Which is fine. Framework, but a lot of times I gotta figure out
Yeah, she was kind of neat.
people love it.
I'm not gonna go, so like, if it was an outdoor thing, like, I don't. There's so many. I don't do
So I think like bringing back
I'm not, I'm like kind of rusty.
but also make it easier
I don't want to put that spot, but he did suggest.
I mean, I would have said, like, he was talking about his own hair.
You can send updates to without having
So I've been on the we have a
well, yeah, I mean, except they're all old school, like they're all like live up to Mount Rock. Like, back in 2008 when I not all of them. Like animals stopped at some point. Damon,
yeah, I mean, they're through that.
I think that he invited those are things I figured out. But we haven't. Actually, I looked it up the last person back in like 2019. Somehow, some way, I've actually
Yeah, that's actually nice. I'll be skipping.
well,
to be continued.
yeah, I mean, but like if we have one person dedicated to communication and like reaching out to people and posting on Facebook, one person for the entire year, one person dedicated to like finding these people, it just like every single time I'm like I have to get back into this groove where I'm like, oh yeah, I also have to do this other thing. Oh yeah, I also have to do this other thing. And also people like being elected to things because they feel power. Yeah. Do you want a mic?
No, I'm good. But maybe just leave it here, because I do have to move around.
Okay. All right. Can I please have your attention, everyone? I'm not a very good MC because
Hear ye, hear ye.
the time is now 7:49. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I would like to first thank Austin Frazier for sponsoring the pizza.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you want to say something?
That's okay, I've been mingling this whole time.
Okay.
I'm Zach, if anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to holler. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So everybody can say thank you, Zach, for the pizza.
Thank you, Zach, for the pizza.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. That was embarrassing.
Good. That was my intent. Just so we're clear. So next up we have Caleb Thompson. Caleb works at the same company that I does.
It's been a long week, apparently.
And do other. Yeah, we launched this thing called Heroku CI, and it's like really cool. Maybe for you, it's like not so cool for me, who has to like maintain and support it. Yeah, Caleb can. I don't know. You probably have some intro slides.
I do.
You talk about what you do.
I do.
Okay. He's also an organizer of Keep Ruby Weird, and we've known each other for quite a while. I also am a co-organizer of Keep Ruby Weird, and today he's going to be doing two of my favorite things, which is sorting, and I guess talking about sorting could be the other favorite thing.
It's your favorite thing.
So with that, take it away, Caleb.
Howdy. Did anybody find Waldo?
Oh my god.
I don't know where he is either. I
can
just
see him right
found that. That's not him.
There's an optimal search path.
There is an optimal search path. I was reading about that. That's going to be my next talk on algorithms. So this talk is sorting Rubyists, and before I forget, Here we go. So, this talk, as you might have guessed, is not for people who studied computer science. If you know what big O notation is, fantastic. Thank you for coming. Sit back, have a good time. You might not learn anything. This talk is for people who call sort on an array and have no idea what spell is moving the strings around, but they get it back in the right order, and that's pretty cool. To understand what Ruby or Postgres do when you call sort on an array, you have to talk about algorithms. It's a scary word, but what it comes down to is just a series of step-by-step instructions for completing a task. A recipe for chocolate chip cookies is an algorithm. I didn't have to understand the chemistry or gastronomy of the instructions. When I realized that this was a good example, I just found a recipe for chocolate chip cookies online, made a batch immediately before I kept going, because procrastinating is 90% of writing your talk, and I ate them. All of them. Before we get too far, I want to talk about Big O. Big O is another sort of scary concept, especially when you see it written out. It makes me think, this is probably for math people, and I make websites, so that's not me. But when it comes down to it, Big O is not really all that scary. It's how we answer the question, how fast is an algorithm? And we can use it to compare algorithms that do the same thing to one another. It's based on the assumption that each step in an algorithm takes about the same amount of time regardless of what algorithm you're performing it. And so we can say, we're going to just look at the number of operations rather than the actual time that it takes, which is dependent on hardware and implementation and everything else. We just want to look at the number of of operations, and compare those so that we can see how fast something is. So we're going to take a look at a couple of algorithms for cutting out squares from a piece of paper. When I previously gave this talk, I got a lot of feedback from the audience that said that they couldn't see what was happening. So I bought a giant pair of scissors, a big-ass Post-it note, and an easel. Hopefully this works better. So the rules are pretty simple. I'm going to cut out 16 squares. And each time I end up with more pieces of paper, that's one operation. I need you to count for me. I'm really bad at this. I can only do one thing at a time. Nope. Broke the rules already.
It's not new
Not
paper.
one cut, one square.
One.
These scissors are definitely meant for cutting one thing quickly and not for cutting 16 squares.
3.
And not for using one-handed.
4. Five. 6.
6. Lines are for kindergartners.
7. 8. 9. 10.
Oh God, these hurt.
Do you help?
Watch
No.
11. 12.
That doesn't count.
13. 14.
All right, 15. So, that took 15 operations to cut out 16 pieces of paper, which makes it a linear time complexity algorithm. And it's represented by this notation. It reads order of n, and it means linear time. If I wanted to cut out 32 squares, it would take me 31 cuts. Even though the number of operations isn't the number of squares, big O of n is still what we call it because n is what n is the function, the growth is linear. You're probably wondering what the O function is. Here's a secret. It means nothing. We call it big O notation because we put a big O in front of it, and that's it. All right, another algorithm.
One. Two.
Still just one.
Still one.
Still one.
Does unsticking count as an operation?
It's an implementation detail.
Two.
Three.
Four.
Four. All right. I promised there were 16 pieces of paper there. And because of that, it took only 4 operations to cut out the same 16 pieces of paper. That makes this a log n or order of log n algorithm, which means logarithmic. If I wanted to double that and cut out 32 pieces of paper, it would only take me one more cut, 5 total cuts to cut that out. The difference between logarithmic and linear growth is pretty impressive. This is a chart of some of the other common big O big O descriptions. On the x-axis, we have n as it grows, and on the y-axis, we have the number of operations, the time complexity. Order of n and order of log n are down at the bottom. They're now orange and yellow is actually behind this green line. You can't even tell. They're much smaller because I changed the scale to from 1 to 1, as we saw in the previous 2 slides, to 10 to 1, because it needed to be that big just to show these extremely unperformant order of n big O notations. So the big ones here are n factorial, 2 to the n, and n squared in that order. If you draw an imaginary line diagonally across this chart, you basically want to avoid any of the big O values that are above the line and shoot for the big O values below it. If we zoom back in to the 1-to-1 ratio, you can see that even inside of those examples that we do want, there's still a lot of performance variation. That's why order of n, which is still yellow, is so much, or blue now, is still so much better than, or so much worse than order of n, which is yellow. A log n. In diagonal, log n yellow. All right, that's the math portion. So, jokes. When do you update a user record? On login. If you understood everything so far, I must be really on it today. How do you debug an app? Come on, we've all done this. You start logging. All right, last one, I promise. What happens when you buy something? Well, Caleb, this is a stupid question. When you buy something, you own it. Nobody liked that one. Noted for later. We're also going to talk about big omega. And this one's a lot easier. It's the same as big O. But instead of talking about the worst case performance, big omega talks about the best case performance. So where big O is the upper bound, big O is the lower bound. And we can remember that because it's got these little tails here. Big omega has the tails, it's the lower bound. The bubble sort algorithm is nice and simple. So it's a great place to jump into explaining sorting algorithms. The algorithm is this. Consider each pair of elements. If they're in the wrong order, swap them. Then move one over and repeat. Keep doing that until you hit the end of the set. And then start over. We're going to remember where we left the biggest thing so far because it's in the right place already, so we don't need to look at that anymore. If you can go through an entire iteration like this without making any swaps, then the set is sorted. So I need 5 volunteers. Just please come up. Yep.
If you don't volunteer, we will volunteer.
That's true. 2.
The answer to life.
9,001.
We need one more.
It's over 9,000. We need one more.
God, Zach did this.
5.1, the Rails version we all want and deserve.
You're welcome.
Pi, the most delicious constant.
You can use the
I like it.
And E, the most interesting constant. Okay, so if we could all line up in that right, you're in the right order, perfect. So, we're going to sort these Rubyists. So, of course we need a sorting hat for this. So, we're going to compare each number, and we're going to swap them if they're in the wrong order, otherwise we're just going to move on. So, 42 is less than 9,001, so they're in the right order. The sorting hat moves. Ta-da. 9,001 is greater than 5.1. Don't tell the JRuby people. So they're going to go ahead and swap. 9,001 is also greater than pi, so they'll swap. And finally, 9,001 is greater than E, and we'll swap once more. Fantastic. So as I said, 9,001 we don't need to look at anymore because we know that it's in the right place. It's bubbled all the way up to the top.
Gryffindor.
42. Greater than 5.1, so they're going to swap. 42 is greater than pi, so they'll swap.
Nothing's greater than
And 42 is greater than E, so they'll swap. If you don't know, pi is 3.1-ish, and E is 2.1-ish. 2.7-ish. Something, I don't know. Doesn't matter. All right. 5.1 is going to be greater than pi, so they're going to swap. 5.1 is greater than E, so they'll swap. And again, we don't need to look at any of these numbers over here because we've already bubbled them to where they need to be. Pi greater than E, so they're going to swap. We're done with that iteration. Now we're going to compare E to everything else, which is nothing. So we've made no swaps, and we're done. Everything is sorted. A round of applause for our sorted Rubyists. Thank you very much. You can keep your signs or your souvenirs.
Sweet.
Bubble sort works in n-squared or quadratic time. For the purposes of sorting algorithms, n is going to be the length of the set. So, order of n squared. And it's quadratic time because it compares every element to every other element in the worst case. Even though we have optimization so that you're not actually making all of those comparisons, the growth is still quadratic, and so we still say n squared. For bubble sort, order of n squared is also the average case, which you can sort of conceptualize as any random array is going to represent an average set of data, an average set that we're going to be sorting. And it has a lower big omega, lower bound, best case scenario of order big omega of n time, which means that for its best case, which for bubble sort is the sorted set, it only takes n operations to confirm that we're already sorted. So just 1 second. If we had e pi 42, e pi 5.142 9001, then you would compare each of those and see that they're already in the right order. You'd short circuit after only four operations and see that you're already sorted.
I was just wondering why the worst case was the same as the average in the case of bubble sort.
That's just how the math works out.
Yeah.
So on average, if you take the average of every single operation, then every single variation of a set, then on average it will be n squared time. And there's like, it's not an exact number here. So obviously like it wouldn't actually be, because the best case is in order of n and the worst case is n squared. But because there's so many n squared in there, the average is moved up sort of to that non-performant example. So as we saw before, n squared is not very good. It's this red line here, and that's one of the bigger growths. And as we know, bigger is worse because it means larger number of operations and usually more time that it takes the algorithm to actually complete. What we want is to be in one of these 4 smaller lines, which are order of n log n, order of n, or ideally order of log n or order of 1. Order of 1 is the sort of ideal pie in the sky, if you'll excuse the pun, sorting algorithm where every set is already sorted, and so your sorting algorithm is to return this already sorted set to you.
Quantum bogo sort.
Quantum bogo sort. It's useful to see a visualization of how these algorithms work. Toptal has a great set of visualizations that show bubble sort operating over different types of inputs. These can help you build an intuition about how bubble sort will actually perform in these various cases. The red arrow indicates the subject, which we used as the hat, and everything that's black is sorted, and everything that's gray has yet to be sorted. We have random, nearly sorted, reversed, and few unique sets, and this will take forever, even though it took me forever to explain this, so we're not actually going to finish watching this. The next algorithm that I want to cover is insertion sort. It's another really simple algorithm, and it's very efficient at sorting very small or nearly sorted sets. Insertion sort is so called because it inserts the subject element into the subset of previously sorted elements in the correct order by comparing until it finds something that it's greater than, and then inserting after that point. So for each element, we're going to consider all elements to its left. And we continue doing that until we reach one that's smaller than the element or we run out of elements to check against. If we found anything smaller, then we're going to insert the subject element just after that place, and shift all larger elements to the right. So let's take a look. We'll start with this one. There's nothing to its left, and so this is pretty easy. It's greater than everything to its left. Look at this one. It's larger than this one, so it's in the right order already. Same thing here, larger and larger, so no shifts happen. Now we're going to look at this one. So it's larger than this, but we're not going to stop here. Or I'm sorry, it's smaller than this, but we're not going to stop here. We're going to keep going, and we find that we need to shift everything over. So we'll keep going through this. And now we have a sorted set. Insertion sort's a fun one because it's one of the simplest sorting algorithms to write. Like bubble sort, insertion sort operates in quadratic time, both for big O, worst case, and in the average case. Also like quicksort, its big omega is also in. Because of the inherent lossiness of this notation, this ignores that insertion sort tends to operate much faster than bubble sort. But it's definitely not a fantastic way to sort a large set of data. Insertion sort does work very well on nearly sorted arrays. It's already finished that. And because of this, insertion sort's often used as a finishing step for quicksort, which we're going to look at next. It shares the benefit bubble sort has of returning an already sorted set in linear time. You can see that it's working much better on the reversed set, and it's generally faster despite having the same complexity representations than bubble sort was. So quicksort. Quicksort is often considered the state of the art in sorting algorithms. This is because the average case performance is very low for a comparison sorting algorithm. Quicksort's algorithm is a bit different than bubble or insertion sort. Rather than moving the element we're comparing against, so rather than moving it and shifting everything over, we're actually going to call it the pivot in quicksort, and we're going to move everything else around it. So if an element is smaller, then it'll go to the left, and if it's larger, then it'll go to the right. If it's equal, then it won't move at all. We're going to do the same for each subset that we finish. So we look at everything that's smaller and quicksort that, and then we look at everything that's larger and quicksort that until everything is sorted. So hopefully you can see these cards. If you can't, please move so that you can. Can you hear me? Coming through in the microphone? Okay. So quicksort doesn't specify what the pivot should be for what we should choose for the pivot. So in the other examples, we've chosen just the first element to be the subject first. But in this case, we're actually going to pick the middle one for reasons that we'll cover in a little bit. So we have 9 elements, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're going to pick the 5th element, which I believe is 8, to be our pivot. So we're going to look at every element, and we're going to move it either to the right or to the left if it's to the left if it's greater, or to the left if it's less than 8, to the right if it's greater. So Jack is definitely greater, so we're going to move it over into this set. We'll flip it over so that we remember we're done with it. Joker. So depending on the game that you're playing, Joker's usually a wild card. So I need you to help me choose which number Joker should be. It can be any of these numbers.
4.
4 it is. 4 is not on here.
It has to be one of those numbers?
It has to be one of these numbers.
5.
5 it is. Okay, so 5 is less than 8, so it's going to stay over here. 2 is less than 8, and 6 is less than 8, so they'll both stay. 5 is less than 8, and it's on the wrong side, so we're going to move it over. Actually, I'm going to flip all of these over because we're done looking at them. King is greater than 8, so it's good. Ace is greater than 8, or is it? Because sometimes ace is low. Should we be high or low? Low? Low I heard first. All right, so ace will move over and be right here. Queen is greater than 8, so it'll stay. Cool, so I'm going to move this onto its side so that we remember that we're totally done with that, and we're going to quicksort this lower set now. Okay, so again, we're going to pick the middle point, so that's going to be 6 in this case. Joker is 5, so it's less than 6, so we're done there. 2 is less than 6, so it's good. 5 will move over onto this side, and ace is low, so it's on this side as well. And then 6 is done. And again, we're going to keep on quick sorting down. This is a depth first recursion, which means that we keep on going lower and lower and lower until there's nothing low, and then we start on the highs. So Joker is 5. I'm sorry, we're going to pick 5. I guess we have to pick 2 because we're going to round down for the midpoint. So Joker is 5, so it's going to be greater than 2. 5 is greater than 2. And ace is low, so it's less than 2. Oops. And 2 goes over here. Now we look at ace. Nothing to compare it against, so it's sorted. Now we'll start looking at the greater sets. So we're going to round down again. So Joker is 5. 5 is equal to 5, so nothing changes. and 5 is just 5, so there's nothing to do there. Nothing to compare against. Okay, king. So king is going to be greater than jack, so it's in the right place. Queen is going to be less than king, so it's in the wrong place, and we'll put king over here. Quick sorting just these, we'll do jack as our pivot. Jack is less than queen, so it's in the right place. Queen just on its own, in the right place. So that gives us a sorted set. And I didn't really point it out, but quicksort is also a stable sort, which means that because joker and 5 were the same, they're going to be in the same original order that they were in. So because it's stable, you know that quicksort won't change the relative order of equal sets, which all of the other algorithms might do. Sorted. So because I did that in meat space instead of on slides, it might not surprise you to learn that quicksort is also quadratic time. But in the case of quicksort, it's very unlikely that you would actually hit an n squared or quadratic time, because that would mean that every single time you picked a pivot, it would be either the largest or smallest element, such that the remaining subsets are of size n minus 1 and of size 0. So I don't remember if that happened there, but here's an illustration. So just like we did with the cards, we're going to pick the midpoint here, and it happens to be the largest element. So when we shift it over, we end up with a size with a set of size n minus 1 and an empty set of size 0 that we're going to quicksort each of. And if that happens every time, then that's quicksort's worst case performance, and it takes n squared times. And it's the reason that if you choose the midpoint as the pivot, because if you feed quicksort a sorted set and you quicksort using the first element or the last element as the pivot, then it hits that worst case performance every time. And an already sorted set is a fairly likely scenario, calling sort on something that's already sorted. So the magic of quicksort, though, is that it's in its average case, it's linearithmic or n log n performance. Average case here is not just intuition like I told you about bubble sort. There's actually several mathematical proofs that show this performance, but they're over my head and out of scope for this talk. Linearithmic is also the best case for quicksort. So while quicksort isn't always the fastest algorithm, and it can be just as slow as insertion or bubble sort for specific inputs, its average case is its best case, and its best case is pretty quick compared to others in the same class of sorting algorithm. For general purposes, meaning an array of only integers, an array of only strings, whatever, this is the cream of the crop. That said, it does have its weaknesses. As you can see here, it does great with the reversed set. It does good with the nearly sorted and random sets, and it has trouble with the few uniques. Here you can see the same visualizations we've looked at for every other quicksort, for every other algorithm, all compared together. As the different algorithms work and finish, you can begin to see that some of them operate better on specific cases. The random set in the first column is a fair approximation of the average case, and you can see that quicksort worked very quickly there. It also makes short work of the reversed set and nearly sorted sets. Insertion sort worked very well as well on the nearly sorted set. I don't remember, but I believe it finished first. On the other hand, and nobody's doing any good on the few uniques. On the other hand, if you step back from performance and you look at actual code, bubble sort and insertion sort are hard to beat for how easy it is to write that code. But what it comes down to is the best average case performance, and quicksort is the winner for that, which is why Ruby's array.sort implementation uses quicksort with insertion sort to finish. Thank you. destroy all software, right?
Destroy all software. So thank you very much, Caleb. Does anybody have any questions?
Did you look into how Ruby knows when to switch from quick to insertion? Is it like?
That's a good question.
That was gonna be my question.
And
That was gonna be my question.
God.
the answer is, it looks at the total number. I don't remember the exact check, but it looks at how many elements that it's already looked at and says, okay, we're pretty close now. As far as like this might take this might take 100 operations. We're pretty close now. We've done 90 of them. Let's do insertion sort, assuming that we're already pretty closely sorted. And then insertion sort takes less than 10 operations to finish it.
Because then it takes like operations to look at itself and check what it. Yeah.
It can guess based on the length of the set.
So there's an optimal point where insertion sort becomes better, and we can guess that when that is based on the number of elements.
Yes, and logarithms have something to do with that, and I don't remember what they have to do with it, but there's a check.
Cool.
It's in the slides actually. That source code on the third slide was for Ruby's sort implementation, and you could see the actual check, but I don't remember what it was checking against.
I have another question. How many times do you ask the annotation of something when you're interviewing someone?
None.
That is the correct answer.
Was there a different notation for average and worst case?
The average and worst case use the same notation, and it's a bummer. Sorry.
That is kind of.
All right, so next up we've got no more talks, which is sad. But we've had talks, and that was great, and I enjoyed them. I think some of us are going to be going to CU29. Is that proper? So if you're interested in joining around for socialization practice, technically we also still have the space for like another 30 minutes. But we have a bunch of pizza back there. The pizza doesn't have to go home, but it can stay here. If you could please take a pizza, if you enjoy pizza and you have refrigerator space, please, please, please. And other than that, does anybody know? So CU29 is like right across kind of the street-ish. Google, I don't know if you've heard about this thing. If you open up your Magic pocket devices, you can type it in. And we don't have a sponsor tonight, but you can hang out, you can buy your own drinks and hang out. So thank you all very much for coming, and
See you next time.
have a magical evening. Take pizza.
Justin, you want for
Did you park here?
No, right across the street.
Okay.
I gotta get parking.
That's good.
Good job.
You're done.
Feel like we're doing a final.
The adrenaline.
He did the cutting thing where I think I forgot that was but this one was certified electric system.
My tour guide.
Of course.
No worries. I love
This is gonna be the next Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle like thing.
Instead of a bow staff?
Yeah, I think we hit like the worst, well, like second worst combination of weather. It just like when I was coming over here, it was like I was getting severe thunderstorms, like stay inside. Yeah, drown, like turn around, don't drown, and then like clear skies.
During this talk, the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah, while I was over there taking photos, like yeah, you can see go down. It's like, well, I'm glad all of us are here.
Yeah, nobody got lately.
Alright, we'll see you all next time.
Yeah. Are you going to? But you've been put on notice. And if you need street work units, help provide that. Tonight, I can get out and go. Whenever I do, basically, I'm bargaining and trading. Right? Like, this is before bedtime, so Ruby has to take out dinner and like bedtime and all that. But that being said, I generally enjoy making things outdoors.
I'm still like sick, so I took medicine right before I used like a limited amount of time before I just
You did really good. So there's a you might want to watch out if your medicine has it's really bad things alcohol and ethanol. I think one of them there's a I think it's called HPP. There's a cold medicine like that's like a high blood pressure cold medicine that doesn't have Tylenol. It's like the only cold medicine in the world that doesn't have Tylenol. Ibuprofen is fine with that. Okay. Yeah. So ibuprofen is it's a little. Autumn have acetaminophen. If you look it up, most of them are acetaminophen because acetaminophen is also a fever reducer.
I accidentally
Nice. Whenever you get NyQuil's active sleep ingredient, Sudafedrin, not Sudafedrin. Whatever Benadryl is, diphenhydramine, something.
These are words that
I'm sorry that you're not feeling well. And please don't get me sick. Thank you very much for coming out.
Yeah. Always a pleasure. Last you asked about my last talk. I think it was search talk.
Just even getting started with team.
But also the beginning of lightning talk version of it.
Really? Yeah.
Or of just the big O part of it. Which taught me that how I was teaching big O science.
Oh yeah?
I don't remember what I was.
So my understanding of Big O comes incidentally from differential equations, where you end up being able to basically model anything in the world by a set of like something to the power of something plus something, something times something to the power of something plus something times. It's like all polynomial, right? Like 2 times x to the third plus 3 times x to the second. And it's like, for me, like mentally, it's just like, oh, well, you just take the first one and ignore all of the other ones. Yeah, it's really like if you don't understand it, well, so A, I don't understand it. Like being able to look at a thing, like there are equations I wanted to say like, oh, this is a blank to the blank or whatever. Or even like I know a bunch of performance stuff, and I would love to do it. Like, oh, I took this from a blank to blank. Oh, blah blah blah. Oh, blah blah blah. And it's like, nope, no idea. I mean, like I could maybe kind of force it if I just added and added. But then you run into the problem of like all of the different cases that it's like, oh, each one is significantly worse than all of the other ones. It's like, well. While I'm adding things, am I doing the worst case scenario? Am I doing the best case scenario? And the worst case scenario is different for different. Yeah. So.
I also had
what's it like? I mean,
10-minute talks on how I section this talk. Round tripping, so I said, okay, here's Big O. This looks a little bit like tried to deconstruct that function, right? Since and then this looks a little bit like slope intercept form, like
Maybe in the
like lifestyle businesses. So like one of the Twitter accounts.
Y equal. Oh, okay, yeah.
so I jumped right to that and I said, okay, so if you plug Y in and do all of these other things. And then we can say there's no intercept, so it's just 0.
get team.
Do you need help doing anything? Are you
Oh wait, do we need to put up our chairs?
You are not going to?
I'll go, but I will try.
Okay. And do we need to stack these chairs? Like we did that before?
Which one? I don't think so.
I know these chairs are so
They like you. There's like no like. I think it.
Yeah.
I want to take this thing.
that's
Yeah,
not
nice.
because we usually have a table here, but our tables have been breaking, so
Like,
we
like
moved.
every
Oh, got it.
JavaScript thing is like,
Cool. Y'all got this one right here?
I like it. I really like it.
Last time they had less
Yeah.
tables. But apparently
everything's breaking.
people broke them during the carnival or something.
How are they like dancing on the tables or something?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like come in and it's like Oktoberfest or something. Everybody's like standing on the tables.
Sounds about, yeah, it was pretty wild. Yeah, no, this looks great.
Cool.
Yeah. I've been trying to think of like good NPM plugins. Like, just like, what problem do I need? Like, trying to look for.
We got
I see the meetups.
Please.
Yeah, I might go one day.
Do it.
I like to sing. I mean, class. Like, use class.
I need people to take you that a lot.
That's that. Yeah, the component of the class, right?
Everybody quit being nice. Please. Yeah, those are empty.
But then there's some like dumb components that still aren't prototype on here. It's like.
So I'm gonna get in the bathroom. By the time I get back, I want all that pizza gone. And then I'm gonna go to.
No, it totally is. It's just I remember seeing that before I ever heard of React. I remember seeing that they added the class keyword. I was like, wow. Is this all like up for grabs? Is this is
Those are empty. Do you want this?
See you, man.
Okay, I just saw. Do you want one? I'm just waiting for my friend. Was somebody trying to give away t-shirts and then they forgot? Oh, the local. Oh, so that must be, like, Richard's coming back.
Is that his?
Yeah, that's the company he works for. I'm sure you can take one.
It's
if you
kind of
like
cool.
it.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
What's Heroku? I guess I should ask. Are these yours?
Those are Masons.
But it says Heroku.
Yeah, it does say Peru. Here we go. I did leave my phone. I can take them.
What's Heroku?
I have like, I don't have an elevator pitch, but I have like a 60-second pitch. You ready?
Yes.
Okay, so typically, you want to build like a dynamic web application, Facebook or Twitter or something, more than just a static site.
Yeah.
And so you spend weeks and months and years programming in Python or C++ or whatever, and finally, like, you've got this thing that's gonna make $1 million and you're ready to get it on the internet, so you have to provision a server, you install Python or C++, whatever, all these security patches, a bunch of dependencies, and like a couple hours later, you're online, you're like ready to go. So what Heroku does is you send your code to us, and we have a bunch of automated scripts, and we take a look at it, and we automatically determine all of that for you. And instead of a couple hours, it takes like a minute, a couple of minutes, and then you're like online. And then like, what's a website that you like that's popular?
Facebook.
Okay, so like Facebook. Let's say Facebook, promotes your new thing, and like it's on everybody's feed, and everybody's going to like crazy, and now your website's just crashing all the time. And so what you have to do traditionally Heroku, we call it building a platform as a service.
Okay.
And the idea is that instead of thinking about servers, you think about applications. So like this one app versus like. Oh, extra small. Do you wanna?
Oh, what is it?
Medium?
At a medium?
Yeah. Sorry. I have an extra large.
Extra large.
Maybe.
Extra small.
Is that just small?
This fits like extra small, but it is a small.
Yeah, they're kind of American Apparel-ish sizes.
Okay.
Can I try it?
Oh, the extra.
That's just small.
But even though it's men's,
Got
I
it.
still wear it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, if it makes you happy,
Yes.
it can't be that bad.
Makes you happy.
Okay. Yeah, that works.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
The other Heroku t-shirt I had tore, so.
Ah. What? What?
Yeah, it tore right over here. I was sad because I really liked the
Really?
logo.
I don't think I've ever had any t-shirts before.
You don't get like little holes like on your t-shirts?
Maybe you just have too many free t-shirts.
Yeah.
Do it, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming again.
Yeah, I guess. Sometimes it just gets overloaded and it's like everyone else like see stuff.
That's not what it is.
Wait, so you're gonna walk over
Oh, where you walking?
to 100 Congress? That's where my office is.
Congress? Are you gonna show me your office?
Sure, if you want to.
Okay, sure. I can go. Would you want to take a pizza?
Yeah, I was gonna give it to the people who work there. You don't have to go.
Wait, why would you go? Why would you go like 10 blocks just to give it to people who work there?
Oh, should
Give it
we
to
just give it to
people
a
who work
homeless
here.
person?
Give it to people who work here then.
But aren't they tired of pizza?
I don't know. I don't think people like to see pretty people. I don't think they usually get like the pizza or whatever. I don't think people usually give them pizza.
Oh, then we can just go down here and then give it to somebody?
You wanna try? I don't think. I think it's kind of like I don't know. Let's do that. Okay.
Where
I'm
are we
gonna leave
going?
my bag here. Oh, do you wanna go inside?